and page 3. Councillor West.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid my laptop isn't connecting, so I can't see which page I want to comment on. There was an action at the last meeting for discussion about a possible extra meeting to be included, following discussion with yourself. I just wondered what the update was on that, please.
I believe that's the item 2, and I'll read it out. To raise the issue of items slipping with the chair with a view to potentially arranging an additional meeting, if necessary, to allow items to be considered during the current municipal year. Well, can we look at putting this into the programme at the last item that we do, so that we pick it up at that point? That would be my intention.
I'd just like to know what discussion there's been so far, Chair. I mean, this is 3 months later than the last meeting, and we've had nothing, despite many of the committee sending emails to yourself, following up from the Vice Chair's suggestion at the last meeting that an extra meeting be considered.
I'm all too aware at the moment, Councillor West, that we do have the extra burdens on the officers relating to what's been happening over the last couple of years. And I'm trying to reduce that where I can and keep it, in a way, prioritise. If you have any suggestions, I'm more than welcome and put it to a vote to hold an additional meeting.
The discussion took place at the last meeting, Chair, that
yes.
The lack of scrutiny, given the first meeting had lasted for just 1 hour and the second meeting had lasted for just 25 minutes, that there were 10 items to be considered this year on the work programme, that we considered 1 at those first 2 meetings, and that we were considering a couple tonight, and that there was a potential for 4 to 6 of those items to be slipped until next year. The committee didn't find that acceptable and didn't find that a good use of our time, particularly at the last meeting that lasted 25 minutes, where probably half of that time was taken up with the discussion that effective scrutiny wasn't taking place.
Wasn't effective, yeah. I wasn't at the meeting, so you've got to excuse me for that. Do you know some of those other items off the top of your head, which you consider to be the ones you'd like to have an additional meeting for?
All the items that are on the work programme for the year are important items, Chair. They all need effective scrutiny by this committee, and they should all be considered. One of the items that we're discussing tonight is something that I've been requesting at this committee since the 2018-19 year.
Yeah.
It's now 2022. I don't want to see other items slip 3 or 4 years.
Yes, we need to be more expedient, don't we, in flushing out the exec scrutiny. Okay, so if we suggest holding an additional meeting, is that supported? Yeah, it's supported. Councillor Pandy, yeah. And I know Joanna will. Well, that's carried then. So we're going to have an additional meeting then. We need to try and give the officers as much time as we can before we have that meeting. We don't want to really do it in purdah, do we? Or do we? Or are we allowed to? I don't know. We have got a meeting in March, so whether we could have a second meeting in March or early April. I'm open to suggestions again, because I know all people's diaries are quite busy. Any ideas? Or do we just put out and suggest a date for an additional meeting and try and encompass as many of those items on it as we can? Go ahead, Councillor Jindal.
Chair, what about having the next meeting in February? Just go for next month. And that way we're giving the opportunity of getting through these items. And then if we could have February, and then if we've got March, and then let's go for April. So I recommend February for the next meeting. So if anybody wants, that's my proposal. So if there's a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
I will second that. It's a good idea. The more we stay in front, the only thing is it's giving the officers less time. But like you say, these items have been on the agenda quite a while. So,
yeah, can I suggest then that we ask our fantastic officer to go away and look at diaries and see what's possible?
Yes.
Noting in the minutes that there has been a delay of 3 months where no response has occurred, and that we are now putting pressure on the officer to arrange something at very short notice, and also giving other council staff less time to prepare for something for us.
Sure. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Item 5. A52 Wyvern Transport Improvement Scheme Lessons Learnt, and we have been waiting a while for this one. Is it
It's me, Chair.
Verma
Yes.
Bayliss? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. And I absolutely take your point, Councillor West, and thank you, Scrutiny Board, for your patience. Certainly, for me, the biggest reason why it's taken us a while to come to you is because this project has created a rich seam of lessons learned, as you can imagine. And actually, we were still going through lessons learned processes, picking up valuable information, having workshops, having sessions with the team in autumn of last year. So actually bringing all that information together across multiple different work streams has been quite a huge task. And I'm very grateful to Caroline here for doing that. And I think one of the, I hope that it demonstrates to you our seriousness about this, our seriousness about the lessons learned, that so many of us are here today to share with you and to have a good discussion with you about it. So I absolutely appreciate that it says that there's a presentation in the report. That was a complete typo. We're going to talk through the report because we felt it was more important to give you a more detailed report than we did last time, and also allow you more time for questions. So I'm going to take you very quickly through it, and I will ask my colleagues at the end if there's anything else they'd like to add, and then we can move on to that discussion. So the very first thing I'd like to say about the A52 project is that we believe that this project has already significantly changed how we do project management in the council, that it will continue to influence and inspire continuous improvement as we share these lessons learned. And as humans, I guess we do tend to learn best from adversity and when things go wrong. And it certainly has been a roller coaster project. I don't think any of us would say that it wasn't. But it's been absolutely fascinating because we've learned as we've gone along. Very briefly, the history is that the scheme was started in 2017. It then was paused for problems, from which a very detailed audit was made with an extensive set of recommendations. And these form the backbone of the lessons we learnt, but it's also important to say that we learnt from our success. After the reset, the project was substantially completed to timescales and is on course to come in on budget. As part of good governance, we undertook lessons learnt process with the main contractor. And as we knew there was a rich seam of personal experience that we really wanted to capture from the project team, we also carried out quite a lot of deeper one-to-one and group sessions to try and really learn and understand what had happened. And in a recent re-audit, it really demonstrated that we had made significant progress and that governance and control in place was now sound. At 4.8 in your report, there are a list of actions that were carried out to improve matters. And some of the most important, I think, that we need to learn are a couple that I've really picked out. The first one is technical assurance. Using an independent assurance experts, get my teeth in, provided a lot greater confidence in the design, in how our approach to risk and our approach to costs as they were being developed. And I think that was really fundamental and very important to the change in the programme. And I'd also highlight that governance project manager role. I can't say how important it was and how effective it was. It really allowed the technical project manager to focus on those engineering and complex technical aspects with the contractor of managing the project, but also created a single point of focus for the oversight of governance and project control. And we'll continue to strengthen both of those aspects in support of current projects. At 4.9 in the report, that highlights some of the major improvements in our project management. And all of those listed provide corporate project assurance and confidence. But again, I'll pick out some highlights for me. The first one is risk management. I think we have significantly increased our level of knowledge and experience in risk management dramatically over the last few years. And certainly on the A52, we learned that there's joint risk workshops, and getting that diversity of opinion and thought when we're looking at risks, costing risks as part of the project, was really, really important. And I think overall that's been a real benefit and definitely something we should learn. The creation of the project management office and the strengthened gateway process. So having that strong PMO that focuses on improvement and best practice, with projects then having to meet, if they meet that gateway criteria, then they must go through a structured program of assurance. And that, again, has made a massive difference to our approach. And I think I'd also highlight the most recent development in creating a new project management platform, which is really transforming our use of data, reducing non-value-added bureaucracy, and really improving projects. And through that platform, we can really collate and share and scrutinise much more easily and have much more confidence in what we're doing. And as the report says in 4.11, we continue to do that through 4 of the main areas that we're now focusing on are project capacity, retention of procurement documentation, progress and performance reporting, and document management. So while the audit and our response heavily informed those lessons learned, as we came to the end of the project, we wanted to give everyone involved their voice. And at 4.12, you can see that many of the themes from those sessions of those involved really reflect those of the audit, as you might have expected. But also they talk about how we've learned from the recovery. What was it that got us into a place where, with the right finance and the right governance, the project was a success? And absolutely for me, the underpinning issue is one team. That sounds really, really obvious, doesn't it? That we might always set out to do that. But actually, building those collaborative relationships takes constant attention, engagement, and commitment. And without that shared understanding, we would not have been able to build sufficient confidence and trust to achieve appropriate budget and programming, but also things like dealing with COVID. It came out of nowhere, but that shared experience of problem solving together, just on how you tarmac a road. I remember the guys were having a dress rehearsal of how do you socially distance and tarmac a road, almost like a theatrical performance. Not to mention putting in a brand new bridge. Highly complex work that really required that trust and collaboration. And it's not a surprise to me that this emerged as one of the key lessons and recommendations from the project team. And 4.13 sets out the other 4, and just to canter through them for you. Governance support, organisational learning, obviously that flows a great deal from the audit report as well. But, the governance that we put in place in that project was significantly strengthened, and it's that solid structure that gave the stability of the project and gave us assurance as a council. And these aspects have continued to be refined and improved, both with governance project managers and with the technical improvements such as the new platform. Sustainable and sufficient resource. Now, although it's now clear from the governance, the role of the senior responsible officer has to make that resource provision, it's an area that requires constant assessment. The needs of a project change, and setting out the roles and responsibilities very early in the process is essential to ensuring we not only have sufficient resource, but also have the right skills and knowledge. And that's a real issue for infrastructure projects because there are national shortages on some of the skills that we need. So we are currently working, as it says earlier in the document, that we're working on the analysis to look at our resources, look at how we might do that through maybe a project hub and a project manager network. Another big part of our lessons learned is that early contractor involvement. So while we need to manage this within our procurement and contract rules, the earlier we get involved with a contractor definitely brings significant benefits. It helps us to establish that collaborative relationship very early, focuses you on those shared outcomes, and if you get it right, builds the trust that makes it easier when those difficult conversations arise, as they inevitably will in large, complex projects. So bringing that contractor expertise and knowledge in before construction through the design and costing phases, working with risk particularly, is really likely to increase your chances of a successful project. And the final one, I appreciate, is perhaps a bit technical, but that BIM, the Building Information Modelling, it's very quite quite specific to infrastructure delivery. It's widely used in industry, but less so in the public sector. And certainly what we'll be doing is looking through some of our supportive bodies like the Midlands Highways Alliance to understand what might be involved, how we might apply it, and learning from those places where it has been implemented. But that's something certainly that we are interested in taking forward and we feel could be a good lessons learned. So that's all I really wanted to say for the moment. It's been really pivotal in enhancing and improving how we do projects in the council, and I can't understate that. We're working very closely with the PMO, with colleagues here, and other project managers now to distribute and embed this learning. And perhaps more importantly than any of that, it's to allow those who experienced it firsthand to really share that with their colleagues. So we are truly a learning organisation, and we bring all this to bear. So anything to add, colleagues? Anything you'd like to?
I think the sharing aspect was the key thing I wanted. The sharing aspect was a key thing I wanted to bring to the table as well, because we've got various different projects and programmes that are being delivered infrastructure-wise, and there is a real appetite from officers in the council to actually hear the story that we've been through and understand the learning that they can achieve. So, yeah, that was all I had.
Thank you, Verma. Are there any questions from councillors here, or any comments? Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, not so much a question as a comment. I do appreciate you bringing this to us. I know that it has taken a long time, and I know that I have been very vocal in repeatedly asking for this, but I also know why the delay has been, and appreciate that this couldn't have come to us much earlier. Also, for those of us that have been on audit and governance or audit and accounts over the years, we have had some updates, and the documents in front of us are very familiar in terms of ratings. I think it's really important, as you say, Werner, that the big lesson that's come from this is how we go forward. And I know that the work that internal audit have done and that the teams have done in making sure that the major projects that happen going forwards don't have any of these sorts of issues, and that all of these are addressed. And I see, a huge amount of risk ratings in scary reds and oranges, which is not what we like to see at all. But I am really sort of reassured to see that they've been spelt out very clearly as to what the issues were, and that the majority of them have been satisfied or partially satisfied, which again, I think if this was audit and governance, we'd be quite happy to see partially satisfied, because some of ours aren't always. So no, just a huge thank you really to everyone that's worked on this. I suppose the only question that I would have that isn't to you really, it's to Heather, because Heather sneaked in to answer things on risk, is sort of the things that we would ask normally at audit is, are we happy with the risk presented in the findings of this? Are we confident that major projects going forwards will be managed better, correctly, with less risk? I suppose, just to get an idea from you, Heather, please.
Thank you. I suppose we've discussed this quite a bit at audit and governance, haven't we? I personally feel that the control environment around project management is in a completely different place. If I'm being honest, if I look back at where we were and where we are now, I think it's vastly different, and I think it's significantly improved. And I think, as Werner highlighted, that Werner and the team have done a huge amount of work. They really have, and I think it's all credit to the team in terms of the way that they have approached not only the kind of, the final stages of the project, but also the learning. And actually, they've really taken their time over this, and really done it thoroughly, and worked very closely with Caroline from the Programme Management Office. So actually, I think it's very reassuring in terms of the lessons learned that we've seen, but also I guess the controls that we now have in place. So, for example, we have the Programme Management Office in place. We've got a gateway process that that enables us at key points of every major project to actually have a kind of a review and a check balance approach, so that actually we are reviewing key elements of the business case before moving on to the next stage. We also have just much better kind of oversight around our projects. That was something that we introduced very early on. So actually every quarter we have regular information going through to, not only the kind of the strategic leadership team, but also to Cabinet Exec Scrutiny in terms of progress on the different projects. And that is a kind of an integrated performance report that actually covers projects, risks and performance. So I just think we've got a much better kind of escalation and de-escalation process that supports us in a way that possibly we didn't in the past. And I think just to support the kind of the sharing of the learning, which I think is really, really critical going forward, we have got much better, I think, networks in place and sharing through some of our kind of manager conferences, senior leaders networks, and certainly that's either happened or is very much in train. And we've done an awful lot of training around both project management and risk management that I think can support us. Just to come back to your original question, is it still a risk? It is still a risk. It still sits on our strategic risk register. And I think we flagged that there is still work to do, whether it be around our kind of project capacity, the way that we are, using sort of performance measures to assess our progress as part of projects, and to a certain extent document management. But I'm confident that we have things in train for all of those, so that, we will continue to improve. So I hope that answers the question. I will just ask Caroline if there's anything else you would like to add. Please do.
Remember to turn that on. So in terms of sharing the lessons learned, this is something that we're doing as an assurance team, and that's within the PMO office, very actively, and it is partially through the gateway process, but partially through the connections that we have with projects that are taking place anyway. So what we've done with the audit report is we've crafted a set of lessons learned that can be applied generically to projects and also specifically to civil engineering projects as well. So we haven't just taken this and gone, right, a similar project, we can only use these. We've looked far more broadly than that. And as we go through checks and balance processes with projects, so reviewing business cases, helping with risk workshops, facilitating that sort of activity, we will identify areas where we know there's a lesson learned that would be applicable. We will make sure that that information is passed on to that project, and we will help them work through it so that there's a successful outcome. So our absolute goal is to provide a successful environment for project delivery. It's making it sort of safe, if you like, for everybody. We're spending public money. Officers want to feel confident in what they're doing, that the right approvals are in place as well. So it's part of a much wider piece of work that we're doing in just improving controls, governance, and people's confidence in their ability to deliver. The lessons learned as well are going to be available widely, and they'll be part of, we've developed a centre of excellence, and this is a library resource for project management, which will be expanding significantly over the next 12 months as we're just gathering in lots and lots of information available to anybody in the council, so all council staff, no restrictions on it, and it's we're sort of reaching out to people. So we're not leaving it in someone's hands to make sure they access this information. We're really proactively working with people on projects to, like I say, make it as successful as it possibly can be. And recognising as well that you need those open conversations about risks, that potentially having a risk register or issues log and things, knowing risks is really important. It doesn't mean to say that they're not there because you've not logged them. It means that actually you've got a management plan in place and that you've got some sort of control and recognition. So I think it's, again, part and parcel of a much wider piece of work that we're doing, that these lessons learned have helped to create that space for this to happen.
Thank you both. I'm really grateful for your responses. And I think, given that this committee has been asking for this to come to us for several years, that could we note our thanks to everybody involved in this huge piece of work, because, as has been said by many, this isn't just about lessons learned of the A52. This is about going forward. This does affect every major project, since the A52, so ones that are current now and ones that will come in the future. And I think making sure that we, are never in the position again that there's sort of one officer responsible for things and is sort of left possibly adrift, but possibly, not forthcoming with information, making their own decisions, changing things all over the place to try and get the best outcome. But I think, if we can record our thanks to everybody concerned in this review, because it is a huge piece of work, and I don't envy any of you undertaking it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor West. Yes, I'd like to convey my thanks for all the hard work that's gone into this, and the lessons learned is the important part. I was involved quite heavily with Derby City Council 25, 30 years ago, when it was all in Roman House, with the technical services people there, predominantly the electrical and mechanical, under Chris Edwards, with the surveyors, the architects, and so on. It worked. It worked. It got dismantled gradually. It worked. You've got some very excellent engineers and other specialists here now, many who may be chartered. And yes, we've got to use their resources. But the individuals need to know the limits, and they need to speak up, and they don't need to be afraid of speaking up. And the more we can go back to some of those old ways, with teams of structural engineers, quantity surveyors, whatever, it did work. It really did. And now I see a council that's been hollowed out, in effect, and it's such a shame. The one-team approach, agree completely, except we do need an hierarchy where there is responsibility and accountability within that. No doubt there will be built in. And really, going back to the suitability and sufficient resource, that really bounces me back to how it used to be at Roman House. They did have that. And even then, I've been in meetings with Chris Edwards and others, and they'd make the decision to outsource something because they couldn't do it. It was too much. And then they would become the overseer. And you'd have the electrical engineers on site at least once a week or whatever. Even if they weren't actually doing the project, they'd still be overseeing it and keeping a close eye. And it kept everybody on the toes. It worked. And yeah, I just thought, when you were saying about people going through, some sort of simple generic flow chart that's there in everybody's face, so that if they hit some sort of obstacle, whatever it may be, at whatever level, they can just flick through the flow chart and it'll take them to where they need to go. But no, it is good work, and this isn't a witch hunt in any way from anybody here. We all understand, and really we just don't want to replicate it. And thank you all for what you've done. Thank you. Sorry, that's remiss of me, Councillor Grimdale. I missed you. Please speak.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Just out of simplicity, and going back to when the A52 project started, I think we acknowledged that was a disaster and that no controls were in place. But can I just ask, prior to the A52, prior to the work that started, all these points that we've listed or are listed today in item 5, are we saying that nothing was really in place when we started this project on the A52? I mean, we had cabinet member involved. I mean, I just wanted to know what was. Are we saying that nothing was in place prior to the A52, which we all acknowledge was a complete and utter mess at the time? And I'm very, very pleased with it's now 2022 and we have gone forward on that.
I can try and answer that, although I wasn't here. So, but I think we had some. There were some elements of project control. There were some elements of management of that, but clearly it was insufficient. I think it wasn't fit for purpose. I think that's the crux of it. I don't feel there was anything else to say really. It wasn't that there was nothing. It wasn't somebody doing a project on their own in isolation, but there just wasn't the support around them that there should have been, and that detailed, governance that we've seen that makes such a big effective difference.
Just a thought, could it have been probably due to financial pressures, and if an individual's given something to do, they don't feel they've got the support, so their head's down and they're just getting on with it, trying to do the best they can in that sort of culture, whereas, like I was referring back to Roman House, they would have the meetings with the top people and they would make a decision collaboratively, and it was usually the right decision. There's very few poor ones. Yeah.
My thoughts, Chair, and I think the thoughts of many, many people, was that initially it was an utter and complete disaster, and a lot of people had to pick up a lot of the work. It was really unbelievable. So I think the A52 will go down in history, and we've all, people have learned from it, which is a very good thing. Thank you.
Nothing else on item 5? Okay. Item 6, City Centre Regeneration Update, and I believe that's Catherine.
There we go. Are you happy for me to start, Chair? Right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Williams, Head of Regeneration at the Council. Werner and I do a double act on this evening, but I guess the first thing I'd like to say is everything you'll hear is a true reflection of Team Derby and the one team approach, because much of the information we want to share about what we're doing short, medium and long term is not only delivered at all by one particular team, it's delivered by services from across the council. So I guess Werner and I are representing a much bigger cohort of people, both within the council and within partner organisations as well. So I think, Werner, you're going to kindly do the first couple of intro slides and then I'll pick up after that. So over to you.
I think I am. So yes, thank you. A really, really important area and topic for you to work through with us. So we know that there's been significant change in the city centre. Some of it was already in progress, but COVID's accelerated quite a lot of the things that I know we all have great concerns about. So it's quite clear that the city centre needs to change and adapt if it's going to survive. One of the key things, and I'll come back to this towards the end of the presentation, is that we need a new city centre plan. We need a new vision for what the city centre is, what it means to everybody, how we experience it, how we live, how we work, how we play in that city centre. And it needs to really be transformational. And I know we bandied that word about, but I think we're very serious in this part. And that's probably through a suite of different interventions. But I'll come back to that. Because what we'll also want to do is then take that plan and actually ground it in some legislation. So link it with we've got approval to start a new local plan in December. So how does this new city centre plan feed into our statutory planning policies and carry some weight when we're determining applications in the future, which really gives substance to the whole thing. And helps us instill that confidence, competitiveness, civic pride, all the things that it says here, as well as helping us to work with our partners in a truly Team Derby approach, not just in the council, but across the board. So next slide. So what we want to take you through today is three aspects really. What we're doing in the short term, what the interventions we're making over the next 12 months, what we're doing in the medium term, sort of 12 months to 5 years, and then what's that longer term transformation, the 5 years to 30 and beyond. So, as Catherine said, this is a project that's really from from many parts of the council, and so hopefully you'll bear with us. Some of the things we both know a great deal about, some of the things less so, but we will try and answer your questions at the end as best we can. So I will hand over to Catherine, who's going to go through short and medium and come back to me for long.
Okay, thanks, Werner. So I guess the first thing I'd just like to introduce with before going into the detail on here is that obviously Derby's not unique in many of these challenges, as we know, and constantly we're trying to learn from other areas and the responses and interventions that they're using to try and address this challenge really of the change in city centre function. And I guess the second thing is in terms of the short term, we did obviously receive a helpful steer from committee members before the meeting this evening that suggested very much there was an interest in the here and now. So what we want to talk through in the short-term interventions section really is things that either have happened, are happening, or will happen within a very short period of time. And they're across 3 themes. We've kind of organised them under 3 themes. There's a community safety theme, which is obviously the information you can see here that I'll run through shortly. There's a culture and arts theme, which is really all of these tied to obviously customers' experience of using the city centre. And then there's a commercial and vacant property theme as well, which is about business and vibrancy, but is also linked with the built environment and the impacts that we've seen on the built environment in Derby. So in terms of the community safety theme then, I think these first couple of initiatives have been publicised recently in that there is now commitment to co-locate a number of services within... Oh, sorry. Excuse me, I don't know why it's done that. To commit a number of... co-locate a number of teams within Riverside Chambers within the city centre, the public protection team, community safety team, and the police's safer neighbourhood team as well. And that will really give both a presence and a real catalyst for better partnership working between those teams. On the back of that relocation, there'll be bi-monthly walkabouts by a number of agencies to identify any areas of issue or concern within the city centre. And there's the creation of 2 new posts, the recruitment for which is currently being undertaken now, for city centre public protection officers, and they will be eyes and ears on the streets of Derby to identify challenges, but will also have an enforcement function as well, so we'll be able to tackle specific issues when they see them arise. There has been a crime prevention scheme launched with businesses in the Cathedral quarter, and this is still ongoing now, so businesses still have the opportunity to benefit from this. They've been offered support from the council in installing crime prevention equipment at their premises, and is being jointly funded between the business improvement districts and the business crime reduction partnership and the police. And a number of businesses have been supported through that scheme with the installation of CCTV and other crime prevention equipment. There's also been, in response to a number of incidents last year, outreach patrols in the evening and night time to support young people and really try and understand some of the issues and challenges behind the incidents that we saw last year. So that's a very kind of on the ground engagement intervention to work with young people and understand some of the issues behind that. And then there's also been some, and continue to be some, targeted operations to address some of the begging and antisocial behaviour issues that we see in the city centre. And that is both from an enforcement perspective where necessary, but also from a support perspective by linking to the multi-agency homelessness partnership and providing support where that's needed. And we're also bidding currently for the renewal of our purple flag status, which Derby City Centres had for a number of years now, and we want to continue that. So that's the community safety team. In terms of the culture and arts projects, bear with me. So there's been a number of council-driven initiatives, but also things that we've managed to support financially for other partners and other organisations within Derby to deliver. And we've benefited in Derby from welcome back funding from the government, and also a proportion of the additional restrictions grant, which was the specific grant the government gave to local authorities to help with the COVID response. So that's some of the funding that's sat behind this. Obviously, Derby Marketplace was summer 2020. That's been in place since summer 2020 and was originally obviously set up to support the hospitality industry during the lockdown restrictions, but has grown and evolved to provide a number of different functions through Christmas, through other seasons within the year, and has recently been complemented with the Derby Loves You venue as well, which has enabled us to bring performances into the city centre. Obviously, Christmas seems a long time away now. We're in the depths of January, but there was quite an extensive festive programme put on in the city centre as well, which included shop window displays, walkabout acts, projections, shows, and a Christmas market. And then there's a number of projects listed here that we are supporting through the ARG, Additional Restrictions Grant, that I mentioned earlier. There's a partnership project with Quad and Derbyan to use light projection to try and animate the space. There's local artists have been commissioned to create a canopy and butterfly installations on Irongate and Sadlergate. And we've supported use of one of the huts on Osnabrook Square for creative activity. So all of these things are really about improving the environment within which people experience the city centre, brightening it up, because Derby, no matter what, well, obviously at the moment in the depths of winter again, everywhere looks great, but we want to really try and create some animation and life and use those creative skills that exist in the community to brighten the city centre streets, so and encourage people to use the city centre. So there's loads more information obviously that we can share with members if they'd like to see that on these various installations. And then finally, where the commercial and vacant property theme is concerned, there is currently, again, across a number of different services, a real review of the public realm in the city to make sure, firstly, all that this work we're doing to try and create installations is in keeping with how the streets are currently, to declutter where possible and make sure that we only have the furniture and the environment that's absolutely necessary, and we don't have too much clutter on the streets, and also to think about the materials and the palette that we might use for public realm in the future if we do manage to secure external funding to improve that. There's an initiative with the business improvement districts, and I think the whole vacancy of shops and units within the city centre is a key area of concern for people, because obviously that is it now at a significant higher level than it was. So there's a medium-term issue about how do we get those reoccupied, but in the immediate term, what do we do to make them to address that visual impact in the short term. So we're working with the business improvement districts again to look at how we might treat the windows, a bit like you see in the Derbyan Centre when there's vacant units. Rather than have an empty window, they put particular installations and graphics on there. So we're talking to the bids about that. That's something that the bids have done for quite a while actually, but we can extend that really to engage local artists and other community organisations in that. There's a refresh of the signage to the city centre as well, both digital and hard signage, if I can use that phrase, again in partnership with a number of organisations to refresh that. And I guess something that we think is really positive in having impact both on the built environment but also in attracting businesses back in to use the city centre is the way we've managed to allocate just over £2 million of that ARG grant to help on a number of fronts to reoccupy units. Firstly, to attract inward investment. So we've awarded grants directly to businesses to encourage them to relocate back into the city centre, and Bamboom Cloud, which is a management buyout basically of a local IT company, is probably the example people may have seen in the press, and will create 90 jobs in the city centre. That's just one example. We've also supported some feasibility work to look at how we might use properties differently, and also we've given grants as capital grants to renovate properties. And, you know, throughout all of this, we've built up a lot of intelligence now about the ownership of property across the city centre. We've engaged directly. We have limited resources. There's no denying that. We can't intervene on every single property in the city centre, but we have, in partnership, really tried to pinpoint those buildings and those locations that have the greatest impact, both in size and geographical place within the city centre. And we're working hard to try and bring forward reuse of those properties. So I think that's everything I wanted to say on short term. So medium term then, I guess the medium term interventions I'll run through are essentially some of the major projects that many will be familiar with. But this is, if the short term is about addressing the here and now and the visual aesthetics and environment in the city centre, the medium-term projects I'll run through are really about starting that transformation in a more strategic, impactful way by the delivery of a number of these projects. They do take time. Major projects do take time both to develop and to deliver, so these are over a number of years rather than over a number of months. But the investment through all of these collectively should really start to shift how the city centre is used, to replace some of that retail that frankly has been lost now and won't come back, and to really create a different place for people to enjoy and a different environment for people to use. So I'll just run through these relatively quickly because they'll be familiar to many of you anyway. But the Future High Street Fund £15 million grant award we've received for Derby will support the transformation of the Market Hall into a destination with a much more diverse and flexible offer within it. And that project, as everyone knows, is underway, and will also support the Eastern Gateway project. And this is a partnership with Kale Street, who own the Derby Centre, to transform that part of the city centre opposite the bus station at the entrance to the Eagle Market to create a different look and feel and different public realm aspect to that part of the city centre. So those projects are underway, funded by Future High Street Fund. Transforming Cities Fund. Werner, would you mind just quickly running through that
Sure,
one?
I'll whistle stop. So the Transforming Cities Fund is part of our mobility programme in the city. It was a joint bid with Nottingham City Council, and for Derby specific projects, we've got about £60 million worth of investment that will be delivered in the city over the next few years. There are a number of different elements. It's quite a complex programme. So lots of improving cycling paths, etc., and walking. One of the big elements as well is to improve bus corridors. So some of those key corridors, not just new bus stops, etc., but some really great technological innovations which are around. So that's priority signals. So when a bus approaches, a bus can talk to the signals basically, and when it's running late, when it's running early, the signals can change and respond to buses. So we're getting better, more reliable, faster journeys on public transport. And there are a couple of two big innovations in there which we're exploring at the moment. One is for demand responsive transport, so a bit like having an Uber bus. So generally You've probably seen them as community transport in bigger counties, but something that we might be able to do in the city. I think it's probably one of the futures of bus transport and public transport, getting it more available and accessible and of interest to people. And the other is creating potentially a new high-speed rapid transit from the city centre to Pride Park, which would take in the bus station and the rail station, which again, it would be quite a groundbreaking and quite different, and animate the city centre and the space in quite a different way. And then one of the other things that I would just mention is part of transforming cities is something called Future Transport Fund, which is all about live labs and testing. And one of the things that was recently launched was our Derby Go app. So that's something called a mobility as a service platform, and it means you subscribe to it on your phone. It helps you with journey planning. You can buy tickets for the bus, for the train, and eventually that will be something that we'll work on and develop as a product. And at the moment, it's an 18-month trial with the university and Derby College. So we're going to get lots of rich information from those travellers and those users, which will inform what the decisions we make about mobility in the future. So lots of really exciting things in that programme.
Thank you, Verna. So Beckett Wells, the next one we just wanted to highlight. Obviously, this is a significant area within the city centre that's been blighted for decades now, and we're starting to see that transformation happen with the delivery of phase 1, which is Granger funded, Granger being a major national housing investment fund. It's a really, really big confidence boost for Derby that they've supported this scheme. And that's the construction of 260 new apartments on the former Debenham site. So that's coming out the ground now. Obviously, alongside the phase 1, we'll be delivering the public square as well, because in creating that destination, it's really important that we have public space that people can enjoy and creates a real identity for that part of the city centre. And we're also progressing, obviously, plans for the performance venue with planning consent in place, an operator identified in ASM Global, and work ongoing to finalise the contractual arrangements around the operation to enable us to take that project forward and start that this year. So that's Beckett Well. Our City, Our River, this obviously started life, I guess, as a infrastructure project, flood defence, but as it's evolved and as Derby City Council have worked with the Environment Agency to deliver it, there are huge benefits for the city centre, not only in terms of the resilience and the support for that flood defence, but also the regeneration opportunities that flow from that. So Our City, Our River is a long-term project, again, a multi-million-pound investment by a number of agencies to support residents, businesses and the city centre generally. Next one, obviously, the Cultural Heart Master Plan is something that we're working on currently, centred around the marketplace and the former and the Assembly Room site, and how we create a real exciting future for that, which is such an important part of the city centre and a real opportunity to transform a key location there. It's obviously been announced recently that we are working with the University of Derby and Derby Theatre to explore the idea of relocating Derby Theatre onto the Assembly Rooms. And last autumn, Cabinet approved budget for us to do that feasibility work and create an outline business case, which is being worked on at the moment. Obviously, we've got the Culture Derby logo there. We are on a long short list now, if that's the right phrase, of locations bidding. And clearly, whilst that's not city centre specific, a number of the themes and benefits of that bid relate to the city centre. So that's that. And then I think there was a specific question about the University of Derby. Obviously, the University of Derby, well, universities generally are a really important catalyst for regeneration across the country, because the footfall and the knock-on economic benefits of having a student population and also the other business engagement activities that universities undertake are huge. So it's really important we build that partnership with the University of Derby. And they are developing, and it may well have landed, I'm not 100% sure, but they certainly have been developing their planning application for a new business school on Agard Street, opposite the Copper Building. So that will start to really draw in their facilities and their teaching and business engagement facilities much closer to the city centre from their current campus. And Castle Ward is just another one to touch on, in that having more people living in the city centre obviously is critical as part of the overall plan. Castle Ward has the capacity for over 800 homes in total, 200 of which have already been delivered. And there has been some really important progress in the last year, actually, with the opening of a new primary school, which was a key requirement, really, to create a proper functioning community with the right facilities. So that primary school is open now and welcoming children every day. And we've also got a compulsory purchase order in place now, which enables us to buy the land that we need with that mechanism to continue delivery over a number of years. So Castle Ward's obviously, again, another long-term project to really change the identity of that part of the city centre. So finally, back to Werner, just to describe the city centre plan progress.
So hopefully you can see that what we're trying to do here is really bring these three elements, short, medium and long term, together, and really, so we've got a really cohesive and coherent plan for the city centre. And the final part of the jigsaw is looking out to that longer term, and what is it, what do we want that city centre to be, what do we want it to look like. So we're in the process of producing a plan in these three stages, but it will create a vision for the future of the city centre, which we will then explain how we, when we look at delivery, how it will be implemented over the next decade. And clear, obviously, the short-term work is about the immediate response to COVID, the immediate things that we need to do. But we also, I feel very important that we need that longer-term plan that addresses some of the structural issues that the city centre faces, which just can't be solved overnight. That's going to take a long-term approach. The vision's very much intended to be to show that we understand the challenges and the opportunities which affect the city centre and provide that aspirational, flexible plan for delivery. It aims to give our businesses, visitors and residents, as well as prospective investors, the confidence that Derby and its partners really want to reverse the current decline in the city centre that we see, and really we want to transform it and for it to be a vibrant and prosperous place. So we're approaching this in the three phases, and we are very much in the ambition phase at the moment. So if we go for the next slide. So what we've been doing is really talking to stakeholders, from landowners, from agents, from developers, from all the people that are businesses, everyone who is involved and part of what makes the city centre tick. And they've talked to us about what they think are the main issues. And so the first one is around that, that absolute need for transformational change, that, the interventions that we make need to be bold and they need to be clear and strong. That we need to look at it holistically. It's about the whole place experience rather than doing little pockets here and there. The city centre plan needs to bring all the pieces of the jigsaw together and imagine the role of the city centre to become a more diverse destination and a choice that people make and they want to visit. Certainly that it needs to be managed and curated. I really like that phrase, that that creative and artistic phrase perhaps, but how we bring that together and how we showcase everything to the best of its to the best advantage. And one of the things that to make it sustainable, we clearly need to look at some of those green and blue spaces, address climate change, decarbonise, and I think that's what people are looking for. People want places that they can see green spaces and they will live and enjoy, because as Catherine said and Castle Ward and the Nightingale Quarter demonstrate, there's going to be more people living in the city centre. We would expect that. The university certainly came up through the consultation. They've got a big role to play in revitalising and key players in successful programmes, as Catherine again has alluded to. Encouraging city centre living, The role of culture, particularly, you know, how does that act as an attractor? The use of our heritage assets, the river, all those things came out as really key issues, dealing with places that look unsightly or unsafe at the moment. And these are the emerging ideas. So again, in that ambition phase, working out where we are as a city, how ambitious are we for the interventions we want to make, what is it we really want to do. So, as I've said, new residential neighbourhoods, we know there's intense pressure on at the boundaries of the city, and that's likely to increase because of the numbers in housing that's coming through from planning and from government. So how do we intensify residential living, and how do we make that an enjoyable and a vibrant experience for everyone who lives there? I think there's been some recent studies, hasn't there, that although they thought COVID would drive everybody out into the country, actually that's not true, and people do still want to live in city centres. So I think that's very positive. Greening, absolutely. How do we improve the green spaces we've got, green other spaces, existing streets, but also introduce blue infrastructure into that? How do we get more water into the city, and what might that be? Making more use of the River Derwent, all the things that I'm sure you've all mentioned many times in many different places. I think one of the key things is around public realm. So some of the other, as part of this process, the team have been looking at where's this work really successfully at the moment. And something that is a key theme is the quality of public realm. You know, it's not just about the big buildings, it's not just about having a big fancy structure. It's about those places and spaces that people move in between the buildings and how good the quality of that is, because that makes people want to move through the city, makes everything more accessible. So that feels very important. Mobility sort of slipped on the end there, but that's what do we want to do with the car in the future in the city centre? What's the role of the car? You know, how are we going to approach the car? What about the inner ring road? A lot of people call it the concrete collar of the city. Can we tame the inner ring road? How do people permeate from outside to inside? Should we be looking at places where we do things in a more creative way around those key junctions, and how we move across the two spaces, if you like? The university we've talked about, intensification I've talked about. It's certainly access to the railway station and some of those key links. How do we do that in a more coherent way, where we know when you get out off the train, how do I know where the city centre is? How do I go straight there? What are the buildings and the streets, you know, to how are they taking me through that experience and experiencing the city towards the city centre? Certainly something around on office quarter and what that might look like, how we bringing some of those businesses together and attracting new businesses. And then that last point, I think, although it's at the end of the list, I think it's probably the most important one. How do we create those new attractors, and particularly how do we bring leisure and culture into this? I think a city centre with culture at its heart, it will be critical for the future. So those are just a taster of some of the things that are coming through. What we'll be working on is an ambition a document, and that'll be out for public consultation in the spring. And that, again, will go out. We'll be running a series of themed workshops, loosely based around some of these, to again inform it further. But obviously, it'll take us a while to develop this plan, because we want to get it right. We want to do it right, involve as many people as we can. So that's where we are at the moment, Chair.
Thank you, Verma, and thank you, Catherine. Councillors, do you have any comments or questions you'd like to make? Councillor West, thank you.
Ask some of them.
Sure. Councillor Grimmadale.
Sorry, Gareth. Excuse me. This is not a trick question, but whereabouts is the city centre?
I think that's a very good question. So there is a city centre defined in planning terms, as planning committee members will know, but we're not restricting ourselves to that. It's somewhat of a, there's the core city centre, as you would know. I think we would probably include the railway station, which is a bit of a spur, I guess. But there's perhaps a bit of a permeable line around that.
Can I suggest a couple of things? First of all, I couldn't see the slides, and I'm so old. I couldn't read the writing on the slides. Could we all have a copy of the slides, and could we then also have a note of where the city centre is? As I say, it's not a trick question. Everybody talks about the city centre, but then to define the city centre, I think people start scratching their heads, and I just think it's quite useful for Joe Public or everybody to know where the city centre is and where we're talking about. My second question, we mentioned the PPOs, the public protection teams. And you probably don't know the answer to this, but I'd like to know how many public protection teams we have. And I think they're very important for the city and for the city centre. And we mentioned the city centre officers. We're recruiting now for the centre officers. I'd just like to know how many people we are going to take on. How many are we recruiting for? I'll make an observation about about St. Peter's Street. And I think St. Peter's Street is one of the worst areas that I experience when I walk down St. Peter's Street. It always seems to be, no matter what time, it seems to be full of drunks and people probably who shouldn't be there. And I see children walking with the parents and people that really just shouldn't be there for the language and the behaviour. And I feel if we're trying to attract people to our city centre and to Derby, we need to clean up places like St. Peter's Street. And then we talk about the quarters, and we talk about the university, how important the university is. We mentioned the university. And we've got the Cathedral Quarter, St. Peter's Quarter, I think the Nightingale Quarter. But I know going back 3 or 4 years, we talked about the University Quarter. And I can't understand why we haven't, the university and Derby City Council haven't got together and established the University Quarter. I know that Kath Mitchell is keen on the University Quarter, and I know other members of the university are keen to. We have the students living in Derby, we have the student accommodation, but if they have a University Quarter, then the students and the people at the university can identify with that part of Derby. Kath always talks about the university being part of the city, and I know it would be Frygate, Agard Street, and that area. And I just think that we need to sit down with the university and move the University Quarter forward. And we mentioned, my last point, we mentioned the unsightly parts and buildings of the city. I think the most unsightly building in the city is the Joseph Wright House. You know, the house where he lived and he died, and you know that for Derby, this man is one of the greatest artists, and we've got the biggest world collection in the art gallery, and it's just that if you look at that house in Queen Street, it's an absolute wreck. When I was the chairman of the Civic Society, we purposely put a blue plaque on that awful building just to say that we haven't lost sight of it. I mean, if you go inside, it can certainly be restored. I have been inside, but I just think that we as a council should CPO it, or we should find out who owns it, and see what's going to be done about it. I think something's going off within the council about that building, but I think we need to move that forward. And they're the points, Chair, I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grimmadale. Would you like to respond?
I'll respond where I can, and then obviously if Werner's got comments as well. So yes, we can certainly circulate the slides and the definition of city centre in terms of the boundary the city centre plan is currently looking at, as Werner described. In terms of the public protection resource, I don't know the answer to how many people work within that multi-agency team, but I can certainly find out more detail behind that and circulate that. The new posts that I reference are two new public protection officers. So the recruitment for those is happening at the moment. And as I say, they will be very much on the ground workers to identify those areas of challenge on St Peter Street, for example, working alongside the bid rangers. But I think the added value, if you like, is that they will have the enforcement capacity as well that doesn't currently exist with the bid rangers. So they'll be able to work as a team, but they'll have that extra enforcement capacity. The technical details of that, I'd probably suggest somebody in Sam Dennis's team would be better placed to explain, but that's my understanding of the resource and what it's there to do. In terms of St Peter Street, this won't necessarily address your immediate challenges you identified, Councillor Grimmadale, but we are actually benefiting on the back of our Future High Street Fund bid. The government has a High Street task force that they deploy to work with local areas and use best practice that they are aware of as the kind of national civil service arm, if you like, to then bring that into city centres and try and bring a new angle and new help. So we've actually got a workshop with that task force in a few weeks' time where we've invited a number of partners to join us, but St Peter Street was identified as a focus for that discussion as an example of the challenges that city centres are facing. So that was just something I thought might be interesting for the medium term. And I guess in the short term, some of the challenges you identified, again, it's everything. I'm sorry you couldn't see the slides, I apologise for that, but the list of the community safety interventions will all apply to St Peter Street and other parts of the city centre as well. The University Quarter point, I guess, I guess that's kind of evolving organically anyway. If you look at the law school, which is now in the Copper building, the plans for the business school immediately opposite, for which a planning application's coming in, all of the other kind of real estate that the university own in that part of the city, Banks's Mill, residential accommodation, etc. So that is naturally the university part of the city. How that then becomes more of a quarter, I guess, is on ongoing discussion with the university.
Yeah, what I'd like to see there, Catherine, I'd like to see the signs up. I'd like to see the signs that that define the university quarter. And I think we need to work with the university to establish that and to make that happen. It's been going on. I've heard about it for years, probably going back 4 or 5, 6 years. And I think that we need to establish for the university, with the university, that quarter, so that when the students come to Derby to learn, they can actually identify with their area. So
sorry, I understand the point now. Yeah. And then the final point on the Joseph Wright House, the Clock House, is that, I think that's the one you're referring to on Queen Street. Yeah, that's. I mean, that is in private ownership clearly, so that is one of the challenges with. That is a visible example, but there's a number of examples like that. Ownership is control. Control really enables that change to happen. CPO is a tool that's available, but there's obviously a very resource-intensive and lengthy process to get to that point.
My concern there with the house is that we're going for the City of Culture, and you can go to the Hermitage. In the museum in Russia, go anywhere, New York, Chicago, you'll find a Joseph Wright painting. And we have the world's largest collection in Derby. And if we're going for the City of Culture, it's fantastic to wave the flag. But when you see the house where he lived and where he died, and Benjamin Franklin, when he visited Derby, I think 3 times, that's where he went. He went to that house. It's got a lot of history. And I just think that as we go for the City of Culture, it's a monument for the city. We just need to do something with it.
We do have information, Councillor, on ownership of that. So as I referenced earlier, there's been quite a huge mapping exercise done to understand ownership across a number of properties. So we do understand that. So that's an opportunity. But I guess it's just an honest answer. There's no current plans that we have from a regeneration perspective. But I certainly take on board your comments about its significance, absolutely, and the heritage value that brings to the city centre. Yeah.
Councillor West. No? Okay. Councillor Pandy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really like the plan. I hope it goes forward as quickly as possible. So something, yeah, quite optimistic and something good to look forward to. Just wanted to ask, as a, if I'm coming from outside, I would need a reason to come to Derby. So, we need to give reason to people to come to Derby. So it's about city centre, I know, but like there are when I say Derby, people say Rolls-Royce and Toyota as well, big manufacturers. And we recently made this museum of making, the push is there. That area also looks nice. Even the town centre I compared to 3-4 year city centre, it looks better with all those, green things, plantation. They look better than what it used to look before. So there is definite improvement in the city centre. But like I said, we need to give reason to people to come to Derby. We also got lovely parks, which are not in the city centre, but around. Make the use of the river, lovely river, which is going through the city. Like the idea of blue and green. Blue would be very difficult. I don't know how you would do it. But any new development that takes place, it would be paramount to include the green landscape into it. Even the existing landscape, like Alan said, there is a lot of history with the city of Derby, and I do agree to that. I took a walk during the summer, and even when you look up, you can see how much history and architecture is in the city. You pass through Sadler Gate, Iron Gate, all those places, Friar Gate, You can see the history, and a lot of people would be interested. Even the Friar Gate Railway, the Friar Gate Bridge, that's quite a monument in itself. It looks, if something can be done, that will really push that will give a lift, as far as the tourism goes. So yeah, and also the another the thing I would like to mention is the Christmas thing. If I'm sure the people who are in charge of this, the main people, the decision makers, they should visit other cities and see, what good are they offering, or how come they are successful. Alan mentioned New York, and I don't know which city he mentioned. I don't think we can compete with those cities, but definitely the most visited city in the UK. Which one, which one is it? And get some ideas from there. Christmas lighting in the city. I definitely think it needs a lot of improvement. In the past few years, we could not put up a show, but that's one that's the part of the year where a city can really put up a show. And again, if we are going for a city of culture and we want to be we want to punch above our weight and we want to do something exceptional, we need to think on those lines as well. You talked about the safety, and I would say cleanliness is another thing which we really need to target in Derby. It's a growing problem all across England, possibly UK, and we really need to do something. So you're saying about increasing PPOs, possibly we need to look at the cleaning rotas and how, if we are expecting an increase in influx, or even with the current situation, how we're going to keep it clean or cleaner. So those are thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pandy. All pertinent, valid points, actually, the same as Councillor Grimmerdale. Not the same points. Councillor West.
Well, sadly, nobody's asked any of my questions, so can I fire them off in order, because there's a lot of them. Firstly, though, I'll just add that I totally agree with Councillor Panday that the last couple of years the Christmas offer and the cleanliness of the city have deteriorated, and we'll say no more. Catherine, the bi-monthly walkabouts that you mentioned that were multi-agency, was that twice a month or alternate months?
I will double check, but I assume it's twice a month.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Derby Loves You venue. It's been a really good addition to the marketplace, and some of the things that have happened around that have been a really good addition. But the Remembrance Day service suffered in November. I had a lot of concerns from residents, mine and others, through Facebook, who were really, really disappointed with how that had happened in November, and just wonder if you know whether that's going to be addressed for 2022, what plans there are for the pavilion that's the word, on the marketplace, and whether that will be there this year too.
Unless colleagues know, I'd have to take that one away, Councillor West, because I don't know on the Remembrance Sunday question, I'm afraid.
No,
so,
that's
I've made a
fine.
note of that.
Thank you. So the other thing, and I think it links in actually to Councillor Pandey's points, that there have been some great things happen in the city centre. We've got some amazing partners that do a lot of good stuff. But how is this shared with residents? Because there's no point us spending money in the city centre and to bring people into the city centre if people don't know the things that are happening and therefore then don't attend.
I guess on that, I don't know whether Heather might have a view from a communications perspective, but given the partnership arrangements around a number of these, there's a range of ways in which it's communicated, as I understand it, both physically in leaflets. I know I received, for example, as a Derby resident, a leaflet about the Christmas programme, but also through social media channels now as well, which are particularly important if we want to engage young people as well to visit the city centre. So I guess there's a range of tools through a range of partnerships. I don't know whether you've got any other comments, Heather, specifically from communications.
Not really. I mean, obviously, we just use our standard channels to, which communicate a range of things, but particularly, I mean, the festive derby and the broader events offer for the city. I mean, we really, really do put a lot of time and effort into that in terms of the communication that goes out to various places. So, I mean, I can get you more detail if you want around that. But, yeah.
Thank you. The next few I'm going to lump together because it's all about sort of the high street and empty buildings and those sorts of things. So, do we have any plan to make the data held, the data that has been gathered over the last however long, do we have any plans to make that available to members of the public or community groups who are seeking to buy empty shops so that they have that information available to them? Are we proactively contacting landlords of the vacant premises to explore meanwhile use options and or maybe encourage alternative rental models? Have we looked at the creation of community improvement districts to work with the business improvement districts to reconnect communities with that economic development in the city centre? And are we able to provide advice and support in any way to community and cooperative businesses to take on ownership or management of any of those high street properties?
Okay, so my thoughts on those questions, Councillor West. Firstly, in terms of availability of information, we don't have any plans as such to publish that data bank of information, but certainly if we know that there's interest from particular groups to occupy a city centre premises, we can work with them either ourselves or through Marketing Derby, who do hold quite an extensive database already of available property, to try and look at what particular units, what particular locations might be best. So I'd suggest it's on a demand basis, if you like. We've got tools that we could use to try and match people with the right property, if that makes sense. In terms of engagement with landlords, we have done some work over the last couple of years in exploring the idea of a make and trade zone within the city centre, and that's something that, subject to resource again and priorities, we'd like to take forward. And part of that idea was to try and use the creative capital that exists within the city to create meanwhile use opportunities. It's an idea that we've explored to a certain extent, but we've done no concrete work on actually putting a plan in place to deliver it. So I guess that is an opportunity and one that we've already identified as something we could do. And as I referenced before, there's a couple of live examples where we've proactively engaged with property owners. One example is the former Barclays Bank on the corner of St James's Street and the Corn Market. Obviously, that's been vacant for some time. We have engaged with the owner of that property, and there's a planning application on the way for a repurposing of that building, subject to viability and all the challenges we know sit behind these buildings being vacant in the first place. So what we can do from a regeneration perspective is when a planning application like that lands, we can mobilise a weight of support, obviously as part of a planning consideration, to really push the benefits of that and explain how important that repurposing is for the city centre. Obviously, that's one consideration among many, clearly, that a planning officer will use to make a recommendation and planning committee will decide upon. But that's an example of the kind of approach we're taking with owners to really kind of understand their drivers, what their plans might be, and encourage them to bring things forward. The community improvement districts, personally, I don't have any experience or knowledge about those, and it's not something that my team are working on. That's not to say others in the authority wouldn't be, so I can take that one away. And the community advice to take on properties, I guess with any new start business, whether it be a community enterprise or a private enterprise, there are a number of organisations. I'm a bit rusty on this because I've not worked in economic growth for a while, but I'm in the Business Link era, which is like 20 years ago, but there are a number of organisations. I know the Chamber has run programmes for new businesses. If it's a community organisation, Community Action have run programmes in the past. So again, if we know that interest is out there, I'm sure within the partnership we could mobilise some support and advice. I think that was everything on the list.
It was, well done, though sadly I'm only halfway through.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying the chance to scrutinise things, thank you. Do we know, are there any works planned that were similar to, and I think there was some sort of heritage funded works on Sadlergate and the city centre a few years ago. So it was, I think probably, I'm going to look at Alan, I think probably 2015-16, there was a lovely presentation at the Bell that was sort of the culmination of a load of work. So it had all happened sort of before I was elected, but I came in at the very end of that. And I just wonder if any of the funding that is available is used to do that. So I know you've talked about sort of the repurposing the fronts of some of the empty buildings as shopping centres have done, but obviously those schemes were to revive the original gorgeousn's of the buildings, wasn't it? And just wondered if there's anything like that currently in place.
I have some knowledge of that. I know there were two projects, weren't they? And I might get the funder mixed up between the two, but there was a Townscape Heritage Initiative that was focused on Green Lane conservation area. So that, I think, was funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. And then we had the shop front improvement scheme that covered a number of properties. The Wardwick, I think, and the Strand are the two most prominent examples of that. And I think that was funded by what's now Historic England and ran over a number of years, delivered by Chloe Oswald and Andy Hill's team to award grants. So I think whilst that money has, on both those schemes, as I understand it, is exhausted now, what it has done is really create a real positive relationship with those funders, and they've actually been held up as certainly the shopfront grant scheme has been held up as an exemplar scheme by Historic England, and as part of our general city centre work, we're really looking to engage more regularly and more strategically with those funders. So we don't just go to them when they've got a bidding round to bid into, but they're actually part of the story, and they're part of the strategy and the planning and all of those things. So I guess the direct answer is the current programmes have finished, but we are on the radar. Derby is on the radar for further opportunities, and we're building that relationship so we're on the front foot when they come up.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really, really reassuring, actually, because it would be a real shame if the work that had been done across the city just sort of ended when that funding finished. So it's really good to know that there's that engagement happening. Sorry, I'm working through this in the order that you spoke, I think. Doesn't help you now. So there was the thing that Werner mentioned about buses, and I've written down, will that be working with bus companies or looking into possible public ownership buses for better linked up transport across the city?
It's working with our current operators. So at the moment, as you know, Derby we have very few levers to pull as far as bus operators are concerned, and we operate in a purely commercial market. But those are very much working with our operators. Obviously, the impact of COVID on the operators we have has been pretty devastating. So and going back to decarbonisation, etc., how we get people to switch modes, change trips, all those things are about having a more reliable and speedy service. So hopefully it all adds to that picture.
Brilliant. Thank you. Becketwell, so the Padley Centre. I know before Christmas there were articles in the news about their relocation and the money offered to them being rejected. And I think they've got sort of a temporary new building, and there's going to be work over the next couple of years to find them a permanent building. Are there any issues that remain now for the creation of the new arena at Becketwell?
So there were a number of conditions that had to be satisfied for the project to go ahead. The main ones being planning consent, which is in place, all the necessary land acquisition, including the Padley Centre, which, as you've said, Councillor West, whilst their long-term home is still to be identified, their temporary home they're committed to, and we are progressing all of the agreements for that now. So we expect within a very short period of time to be contractually closed on that, if you like, and have all that in place. And then the final major condition, if you like, is having an agreement for lease in place with an operator for the building. And our operator's been identified, ASM Global, through a procurement process led by the developer. We've been negotiating with them over the last few months to get that agreement for lease in place. And again, we're in the final stages of that. So once that lease agreement is in place and that condition satisfied, those are the last two, essentially, Councillor West, that we need to satisfy to then progress with the project. Once those are satisfied, the forward funding agreement kicks in and the project starts on site, basically, with the demolition. So that's where we are with that.
Thank you. Nearly there, honestly. So the Assembly Rooms plans, working with the University and Derby Theatre to relocate the theatre towards the Assembly Rooms site. Do we know what would happen to the current building, Derby Theatre's building? What would happen to that? And also, what would happen to the car park at the Assembly Rooms? Because obviously that is a huge resource for the city centre, for places like Quad, who've got agreements to have reduced parking in place. There was something else I was going to say and I've forgotten. And I'm going to tie one into that one and ask what's happening with the Guildhall Theatre as well.
Right, hang on. Okay, so in terms of the existing Derby Theatre building, we obviously, Kell Street clearly are aware of the discussions that are happening with Derby Theatre. In the spirit of partnership, we've engaged with them and been open with them about that. I'm not aware of what their plans might be for that. It's their asset and their ownership, so that will be something for them to determine should the feasibility study prove a business case and the project proceed, and that's the bit that we're in at the moment. So that's my answer on that one. The car park, the planning consent, conditional planning consent that we have is for the demolition of both the Assembly Rooms building itself and the car park. So that's the basis on which development plans are being progressed. In terms of car parking provision, Verna may want to comment, but clearly there's a longer term question of how much car parking provision do we need and want in the city centre in line with our city centre plan long-term objectives and sustainability considerations, and then in the short term, what do we currently have and how do we go from where we are now to that longer term vision. So it's a bit of a kind of immediate and longer term answer, but the reality is the consent is there for the demolition of both, both buildings on that site. But we recognise that if, as and when we lose that car park, we need to be clear about what else we have in the city centre and how we get the right provision, really. And then the final Guildhall Theatre, I will have to, I'm not genuinely involved in the Guildhall Theatre discussions at all, so I would have to take that one away unless anybody else can help with that one. Sorry, that's purely my portfolio and knowledge. I'm sorry about that one.
No, it's fine. I appreciate the answers that I am getting. Right, I'm going to go sort of 2 more slots. So one is to do with tourism in the city centre. So we've already talked, and Alan's talked about some of the fantastic things in the centre. Is there any funding available or being utilised to give proper funding to both Quad and Derby Museums, and to Dada actually, and also to Visit Derby, for them to be able to do more things to bring people into the city centre? Alan will remember when he was cabinet member that Visit Derby were wanting to do tourism maps for the city, but don't currently receive enough funding to pay their staff's wages and have to find clever ways to do that, which they do. They're an amazing and very small team, equally or more than amazing because it's such a small team. But whether any of that funding that we have for bringing things into the city centre can be utilised for some of the existing departments within the council and linked to the council and some of our partners.
I guess so. The additional restriction grant funding I referenced, that was provided to local authorities by government to pass directly to businesses and organisations to benefit from. So certainly that pot of money wasn't one that we could use on our own services. The Welcome Back Fund was slightly different because that did support some of the early activity in the city centre during lockdown. In terms of the bigger question about funding, strategic funding for key cultural organisations, I would have to take that one away. I just know that as part of the ARG grants, there were a number of cultural partners supported with that funding, not only through the various projects that I outlined that are creating vibrancy and new installations and attractions in the city centre, but I think almost as organisations and businesses, they benefited from some of that money to support their operation during the various restrictions. So that's all I know on that one.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you for your patience with this section of the
fine.
Joanna West
That's what
show.
it's for, isn't it?
Last question. How much of this plan, the medium, short, long term, will depend on us being shortlisted for City of Culture, super shortlisted for the City of Culture, or indeed us becoming City of Culture in 2025 or possibly the future?
Okay. I guess my view on that is everything that I described in the short, medium and what Werner described is happening. So there isn't a dependency between us winning City of Culture status and all of those things being delivered. I guess it's iterative, isn't it, to a large extent, because everything that I've described is part of the story that we're telling to really sell Derby in that arena, alongside loads of other stuff as well that partners have chipped in. And if we are to be successful, then there'll be a whole host of benefits, financial and otherwise, that you would hope flow from that status that will enable us to build on everything we've described. So, one feeds the other. But the direct answer in terms of dependency is there is certainly everything on the short and medium term that I described is happening anyway, and the city centre plan is happening anyway. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor West. Thank you, all councillors. I've got some comments and suggestions. You may want to respond, you may not. And other councillors may need to come back as well. But there's only a few things, and it's trying to be constructive, really. Well, I'll start off negatively then. We've mentioned sustainability, and I believe that's what cascades down from the UN via the EU and so on. It's a word we've got to be careful with because it masquerades for something it really isn't, or can be. Like, consider it like smart motorway, which ends up not really very good. So we do need to be careful when we consider sustainability. Transport, yeah, great. It's key. It's key to the success of this. I remember growing up in Ulverston in the 1970s, and I could jump on a bus. We could go to town, and if you miss it, there'll be another one in 15 minutes. I know we can use the methods now with the phones and everything else, but integrated transport is absolutely key to this, to the success of the city centre. And Alan will probably remember as well, I've seen a big decline in the buses. When it used to be the bus depot owned by Derby City Council, I know it's nostalgia, and I know we can't go back, I'm not asking for that, but we can learn some lessons from it, and we can try and carry it forward. But yeah, and it's good to see the positivity about the transport. And then we were talking about, for St Peter Street, which Alan mentioned again. And if I think back again, I'm just going back, I think back to the 1970s and going up and down there, holding my mother's hand with my Dr. Dot book. It was packed. It was packed. And you were kept on the pavements because it wasn't paved at that time in the middle, and the traffic was going up and down. But the city centre was so vibrant and alive. You couldn't, people, it was a social gathering really as well, with all the different aspects of it. And again, I understand, you know, the big shops, the C&A's, the Woolworths, and all the others are all gone, or mainly gone. But I don't want the defeatist attitude of saying that the shops won't come back. Because I believe they will. I believe there'll be a turn in the tide with people wanting to just go on Amazon or have the shopping delivered. It's convenient and easy. In the end, people are going to be hankering after the past. If I could go into... I mean, there's examples already where shops work or have worked up until COVID. And one of them is on the Moorledge, Soundbites. Soundbites is just across the road from here. I shouldn't be promoting them, but they are a cooperative. They're a non-profit cooperative. Organic food, sourced from farmers globally, but as close as possible. And I've used that shop for years, and I've seen it get busier and busier over the years. There could be other examples like that that could stimulate the city centre. You know, probably an organic butcher's, who knows? I know we're all told we shouldn't be eating meat, but nevertheless, that's just an idea. We talked about the parking as well, and really pertinent with the assembly rooms and losing all them spaces. Again, I know under the sustainability, we're trying to push people away from cars and have this society where we all go on electric scooters or other forms of transport. But if we're going to stimulate the city and we're going to have big venues, we do need the car parking. We really do. And I understand if the assembly rooms now, it's 50 odd years old, it might not be capable of today's standards, but we shouldn't be knocking it down until we've got a replacement. So to me, we ought to be saying, don't get rid of it until there is a replacement actually ready to go. Otherwise, we're leaving ourselves even shorter without something else. There's not many more things. We talked about the pavilion in the marketplace. Yeah, and it's been relatively successful. But I'll tell you what was really successful, I thought, was the skating ring. It seemed to be really successful. And that, again, drew people into the city centre. And then linked to that, we spoke about communication of that. We know we've got the electronic versions and so on. But I don't know how this would work, and cost-wise, possibly saving money, but we get notices on our wheelie bins telling us what the Christmas things are and so on. Could we utilise the bin collection guys 2, 3, 4 times a year? So there's another leaflet pushed in explaining what's going off for that quarter of the year. You know, without great cost and expense of sending a letter out with a stamp and postage to every address in the city. So it's only an idea. Yeah, you mentioned also Barclays being repurposed. Did you know what it's going to be repurposed for, or any ideas that have been tabled? Would that be interesting? And really, I think, again, going back to what Alan and Grab were saying, Councillor Grimmadell and Councillor Pandy, sorry, they were talking about Derby's got all these jewels and things. We know we've got that. We've got heritage in railway. We've got the round table at the college. That could be somehow adapted. So if people do go to the station, it can become a showpiece to see. It's fantastic. Most of us have been in there. It's fantastic. We've got the aero industry. We know about the Joseph Wright. We've got Smith's clocks. The list is nearly endless of what we've got. I think we are the ghost capital of the country as well. And for hangings. I know it sounds macabre, but you go down Vernon Gate, and I'm not, Alan might correct me, but I believe the road was made wider with the Georgian houses to get the crowds down there on a Saturday to see the hanging, and it's still there. It's still there. And you think, oh, these are fantastic things that we could be promoting. And then somebody who comes to Derby, who doesn't know it, they start to see all this. And yes, they want to go on a whistle-stop tour around the city. And I do think we can achieve it. I really do. And if we can all be part of that and leave a legacy for the future generations, then yeah, let's do it. I think that covers me. Yes, it does. Thank you.
So, Werner, do you want to... I bet everyone's fed up with my voice. Do you want to start on sustainability and transport?
Well, there was so much in there and loads of... No, that's all right. Loads.
I did say comments.
Yes, you did. Loads of great ideas. And I suppose, for me, it goes back to the plan and, it's about our ambition for the city, what do we want to do and how interventionist do we want to be? What have we got the appetite for? So certainly, when, hopefully, when that document comes out in the next few months, then obviously we'll be looking to you, to councillors, to everybody to feed into that consultation and maybe that's something we'll come back to and talk to you about. It'll probably be quite sensible. And, you can bring some of this thinking in there.
Any more comments, councillors? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Verma. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, item 7, remit of work, programme and topic reviews. So this might be quite pertinent now. Just get it up.
Appendix 1 is the main.
Yeah, I think I'm on... That's for item 8. Yeah. Give me a second. Yeah, I've left it behind it. There we go, appendix 1. So what we've got proposed at the moment, we've got to shoehorn in this additional meeting in February. But what we've got to be confirmed for the 15th of March is the Moorways update and Our City, Our River project. Is everybody happy with those two? It might be we could do more than 2 topics. Tonight we've probably extended this a little longer than we needed to, but it's good, we've got the time. We don't want to rush this, we want to use the time valuably. So, is there any suggestions for the March and the additional meeting that we're hoping to, will hold in February? Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. Can I suggest that given a lot of the items that are there for March or for future meetings involve either Catherine or Werner, that we find out from them what might be possible at either a February or a March meeting?
Great idea, Councillor West. Verma, do you want to respond? Have you got the list in front of you?
Sorry, Werner. For the March meeting, it's suggested for the Moorways update, which is Claire Davenport, and then the Ocor project, which is down for David Fletcher or Catherine. Items for future meetings, for you, Werner, HS2 update, and with or without Andy Hills, the climate change, which I see from the exec scrutiny, they would like to see going to all review boards. So that might be something that needs to be a standalone meeting that all councillors on scrutinies are invited to, which might take it sort of specifically off of our work programme. But I guess, Catherine, Ocor, are you in a position to update us in March or in February if we have another meeting?
Yes, David is SRO for Ocor, but I'm heavily involved as well. That project team sits within my service area, so either David or I will be happy to attend. Yeah, for Our City, Our River. If it was, where are we now? Yeah, if it was mid to end of February, probably avoiding half term. Sorry, I'm just thinking practically in terms of dates and things. We could look at that.
Okay, we'll try and look after the half term for the February meeting then. I believe for the March meeting, we were going to be looking at teaming up with under item 8 with the corporate scrutiny, so to look at the climate change issue. We could, I think they're meeting on the 10th of March. So if that was the case, would we be able to incorporate what we're doing on the 15th of March, on the 10th of March, and then have the meeting on the 15th of March? Or are they too close together? And would that... I'm only thinking, of options here.
What's happening about the February meeting, Chair? What are the subjects for that?
Okay, you're quite right. Let's define the subjects first that we want additionally, and then clarify the dates and so on afterwards. Thanks, Councillor
I
Greenbelt.
just wonder if I could suggest probably Marketing Derby update, John Forkin. That's rather standalone. So, yeah. So John could come to February for the Marketing Derby update, and possibly Maria Murphy for the homelessness. So they would be my suggestions for February.
Okay,
Do you agree,
does anybody object to that or want to alter it in any other way? Okay, we'll take your wise options there, Alan. I'm in total agreement as well. So let's do that at the extra meeting in February. Date to be confirmed. The March meeting then, we're doing that under item, no, 'cause it's overlapping, isn't it? Yeah, it's overlapping. Okay, so the 15th of March then, the date may change when we get to item 8, but we're looking at the Moorways update then and Our City, Our River. Does anybody want to add anything else to that or include something new or anything else?
I just wonder if Werner would be available, and or Andy, to do sorry, no, not Andy, because that's climate change, to do an update on HS2.
Thank you, Verma. So we'll include that on the 15th of March. It may be moving to the 10th. We'll find out in a minute. Great. I think that concludes item 7.
Not quite,
No?
Chair.
Not quite. Okay. Thanks.
We had discussed the topic review at our first meeting in June. We decided on a topic, which is why I had quite so many questions, Catherine, sorry, on regenerating our high streets as a topic review. I've heard nothing further since Karen asked for suggestions on that, and I sent a whole list of things in the summer. We're now in January with not much time left to go of this year, and we've not undertaken the topic review that this committee agreed to do in June. Just looking for an update on that, please.
Okay, let's dig out that information that's obviously not being progressed and include that on the March one as well. No?
We can't have a topic review as part of a meeting. Topic reviews have previously been standalone, and they've been a topic to look at throughout the year.
We're running out of time, aren't we? Sorry.
We are, Chair, and this was something that the committee agreed at our first meeting in June and stressed needed to be looked at. And I think one of the members, and I forget who it was, did stress at that first meeting that we don't have enough meetings during the year. As we've clearly seen, that we well, since October, have been asking for another meeting. But this is something that this committee agreed to. You chair this committee, and nothing's been done.
No. Point taken, Councillor West. If we'll revamp that information, and then we'll have to do it in the next few weeks, won't we? I don't know what the constraints are in any officers and their times to be able to give us the information for the topic review, but and then its availability. So if you want to propose some dates at your earliest convenience, and we'll try and fit in with them, and the others will. I'm more than happy. You know, although I'm the chair, it's my prerogative. I don't see it like that. So let's do it. Yeah, and we'll get the emails out, and we'll see if we can try and get this moving, because we are running short of time. Okay, anything else on item 7? No. Item 8. Items referred from the Executive Scrutiny Board. I believe you may have the extra piece of paper in front of you that mentions all the items here. And the March to be confirmed is the particular one I'm looking at first. Our City, Our River project is the one really that they want to hold jointly with the Corporate Services Scrutiny Review Board. That's chaired by, I think, Councillor Nater. But it's on the 10th of March. So I don't know how that would work really, whether we just attend that meeting as well, or whether So then we still have our meeting on the 15th. That otherwise is too much. I don't know how councillors feel about that. So that item, we would, our City, Our River project, we would, you know, be privy to that on the 10th under the Corporate Services Board. Any comments?
Is there any reason that we have to alter our work programme to meet the corporate services scrutiny schedule, Chair?
No, I'm just trying to be obliging. I've not received anything or any coercion or any persuasion from anybody. I'm just trying to be adaptive. But if it's not flexible with the councillors, then we'll have to say no. We need to stick to it.
I think it might be worth just checking with councillors who aren't here. I know that I have another meeting at the same time on that night, so I wouldn't be able to take part in that. Given that we set these dates in May for the year, adding things in is often difficult, I know, but I do think it might be worth checking with members of this committee as to what their availability is that night.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that then. We'll send out a note to all the committee members. If Karen can do that, and then we'll take the action according to that. And if we lose more than one or two, then we need to not succumb to the 10th and stay with our date of the 15th. But it might be the corporate services join us instead on that date. And it works in reverse. Yeah. Sorry about that, councillors. I was just making sure I didn't miss anything, really. For the Future Works programme, we've got to be including the climate change presentation. It's showing up at the moment as at April, to be discussed at our board here. But I don't know if anybody's got any ideas about that. But April, let me just check. We're not meeting in April, are we? So it's going to have to be in next year, isn't it? Yeah, sure.
Chair, can I just make an observation going through these papers? When we look at January, today's meeting, it does mention city centre regeneration, including performance venue and the university quarter update. So I'd like some feedback, Catherine, on that one, please. I've only just noticed it. So it does mention it, so I do look forward to that.
Well spotted, Councillor Gummidale. So one of the items for next year then will be, well, next municipal year will be the climate change. Do we have any others? No.
Yeah, is it something, so I'm just thinking out loud, is it something that the climate change item, given that it is to be referred to all scrutiny review boards, could that be done as some sort of unofficial online or hybrid meeting to try to enable as many members of the scrutiny boards to partake in it? I'm looking at Karen to see whether that would be legal.
If it was a public meeting, as we are today, then no, we'd can't do that currently with the legislation. But if you had an offline meeting that wasn't open to the public, then yes, you could do that.
Is that potentially something worth pursuing, Chair, do you think? Maybe speak to other chairs of other scrutinies to see whether that would be possible?
I think it's a good idea, Councillor West, and it should certainly be explored. And if it comes to fruition, great. Wherever we can save money and say not repeating the same thing to different committees has got to be good. Yeah, I totally agree. I wonder if we could do it at one of the chamber meetings or afterwards, after the main meetings. But some wouldn't want to stay, would they? Yeah. Yeah, good idea. So we'll put that out as well. We'll speak to the other chairs of the other scrutinies and see if we can come to some agreement. Right, thank you. Thank you, officers, and thank you, councillors. Hopefully it's been a reasonable meeting tonight, and I think we've all taken quite a bit away from it. And I'll see you all in February, date to be confirmed.